The story leads our bulletin at this hour. The latest unemployment data will be released today. In the first 3 months of the year, the country's official jobless rate rose to 30.1%. This release looks at the period between April to June. The figures are expected to hit record highs, mainly due to COVID-19 and the subsequent lockdown. Let's discuss this now with Labour expert Sherisa Rajah, who joins us now via Skype from Johannesburg this morning. Sherisa, not a pretty picture if we go by the predictions of a record 34.8% expected for the second quarter.
Absolutely. I think if we give numbers to that, what we were looking at in around July 2020 was that we had already endured 3 million unemployed persons as a consequence of the lockdown and coronavirus on our economy. And in that 3 million, 2 million of those unemployed persons were females, were women who were in employment. And that's just in the formal sector. We don't count the informal sector where domestic workers, gardeners, etc. have had no hours of work, or now we might see reduced hours of work. So it's not looking like a pretty picture at all. And I think that's been very modest.
And we had a lot of people who were furloughed. And also what might complicate the picture for us in the country is that many people who were laid off during this pandemic have lost jobs forever. They've been permanently unemployed.
Yeah. I recall the stats that came out I think about a few months ago said that there were 1,500 CCMA referral claims relating to collective or mass dismissals. So we're not talking about individuals, we're talking about groups of people. And I think that coupled with that, that context must be looked at within the understanding of our social insurance landscape. We have very low levels of social security insurance. So if you are made redundant, if you lost your job, you're looking at somewhere between 3,000 and 6,000 rand a month as an income supplement from the Unemployment Insurance Fund. And the other point to make is that National Treasury still plans to go ahead on its 160 billion rand cut from the public sector wage bill, which we know is opposed by the public sector trade unions. So I think that we're looking at a shrinking economy right now. So I think we're all waiting in anticipation for these statistics to come out this morning.
Yes, I mean a shrinking economy, meaning that the outlook for the growth of this economy is very weak. And I mean, if you want to recover the job numbers, it's going to be a long, protracted one.
I agree. I think we look more and more to entrepreneurship, to people who've lost their jobs, creating employment by starting new ventures. We're looking to VCs to see what kind of investment they can put back into South African economy to expedite a recovery. There have been many articles on this topic, and we've looked at something like a 5 to 10 year recovery plan. But we've also got to factor in the massive numbers of families leaving, the immigration numbers of high income earners leaving South Africa right now as a consequence of all these things that are happening. And the globular picture looks a little bit bleak for us as a country. So now more than ever, we're counting on active citizenship for people to invest, we're looking at trade. But then when you start looking at these things, you realize that Europe's in its second wave of the coronavirus, which means it's a matter of time before trade is impacted again, investment is impacted because of our intercontinental relationships, particularly when you consider the motor industry, the construction sector, and those sort of things. However, telco is doing well. Telecommunications has survived this, and many businesses have been able to work completely remotely during this time. The question is, how can we make that a positive into rebuilding our economy as we come out of lockdown and revive our economy at this point, so as to prevent joblessness, so as to prevent people being laid off.
It looks like it's a very huge mountain to climb there, because if you think about it, Sherisa, the jobless rate in this country has been above 20% for at least 2 decades. So you already had an unemployment crisis leading into the coronavirus pandemic. And of course, we had that skills gap that we always hear about, particularly in the formal sector. Do you think, numbers-wise, after we've analyzed what we see will come out this morning from Stats SA about Q2, that the future is informal, the future is entrepreneurial?
I think the future has been entrepreneurial for a very long time. It's about whether traditional business and traditional leadership has been ready to embrace that. I think that our employment laws are static and people get scared when it comes to consequences of change. And I think now South Africa more than ever is pushed into looking at the opportunities for remote work without borders. I've been a huge proponent of the idea that work without borders or remote working means that a South African citizen can take a job in London and Netherlands and the Switzerland area by bringing work to the employee as opposed to the other way around. We can counter the immigration statistics and these numbers by bringing work into South Africa, because we do have a lot of talented people. And I'm not just talking about the traditional leadership talented people who may have lost their jobs. I'm talking about the youngsters coming out of universities now with all sorts of ideas around disruption of traditional business models, disruption of brick and mortar, and so forth. And the push for this is that when we talk about the 3 million that lost their jobs, this is bringing our total numbers as at July 2020, before the new Stats SA reports comes out this morning, to a total of 7 million South Africans who are now unemployed at home. And if you think that they can survive on 6,000 Rand a month, it's not possible.
Sherisa, thank you very much for your insights as we preview the Stats SA numbers that are coming out later on this morning, and not a pretty picture at all. South Africa, depending on the predictions, of course, if they come up that it's true, just under 35%, that would be a world record, will be one of the highest in the world in terms of our unemployment rate. And now